It's a new year and a new chance for you to make a fresh start with your compliance. We're going to be bringing you a daily tip, strategy, or idea that you can use to improve your program. Here's your host, Tom Fox, the Compliance Evangelist.
Day 3, Continuous Monitoring and Continuous Improvement. Continuous monitoring and continuous improvement are two of the most important phrases for any compliance program. These twin concepts were perhaps the biggest modifications in 2020 to the update of corporate compliance programs from the Department of Justice. In 2021, all companies' risks changed as we moved to working from home to return to the office and now the hybrid model of work. These changes in our basic work locations drove home perhaps the most prescient comment I heard during the pandemic year of 2020, which was by Jed Gardner, who said, quote, "We have moved from disaster recovery to business continuity to business as usual," end quote. What this means is that risks will change in ways you may not see at speeds you may not anticipate, but you have to be ready to respond in a business as usual manner. Your compliance program must be ready to respond to whatever those risks are going to be going forward. In the 2020 update to the evaluation of the corporate compliance programs, the Department of Justice asked a series of questions regarding your review and continuous monitoring. While there are several questions, they often inquire about the data you obtained from your own work, but also from other companies in your industry or operating in the same geo-region. Also, the Department of Justice had another series of questions about the sufficiency of the documentation of your compliance program. I have long preached the mantra of document, and this mantra is now as important as it has ever been. It is not simply, is your information documented? Because if it never happened, if it's not documented, it never happened. But if you documented the basis for your decision, you can then explain your decision-making calculus. When was the last time your policies and procedures were updated? Perhaps more importantly, what was your process for doing so? What was the rigor around your process? Did that rigor include incorporating information and data collected through continuous monitoring, real-time monitoring, or continuous access to operational data and information across corporate functions? The 2020 update asks if you have tracked who has looked at your policies and procedures and where they are located as data points for you to consider in updating your compliance program going forward. A final area, or an area in addition to continuous monitoring, is continuous improvement. Here, the Department of Justice has asked, how often has your company updated its risk assessments and reviewed its company policies, procedures, and practices? Has the company undertaken a gap analysis to determine if particular areas of risk were not sufficiently addressed in your policies, procedures, and training? What steps has your company taken to determine whether the policies and procedures and practices make sense for particular business segments, subsidiaries, or even geo-regions? Does your company review and adapt its compliance program based upon the lessons learned from its own misconduct or those other companies in your industry who may have faced similar risks, companies operating in the same geo-regions with you who have faced similar risks? Similar to the language in the update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs around risk assessment, this series of questions considers the adaptation of a compliance program from your own lessons learned, but also from other companies. The distinction now is that your phrase, other companies facing similar risks. Think about how this language would apply to any company operating in China, West Africa, or any other high-risk region across the globe. I would interpret this to mean that every chief compliance officer and compliance practitioner needs to stay abreast of international ABC enforcement actions where your company is doing business. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be back with today's 3 key takeaways. So what are the 3 key takeaways for today? Well, first of all, how has your company's risks changed over the past year? As I mentioned in the start of this podcast, your risks have certainly changed. In 2020, we were all working from home. In 2021, at least during the summer of 2021, we considered returning to the office. Now it looks like we'll be in a hybrid model, perhaps into Q1 or even Q2 in 2022, or many companies may decide that this hybrid model of working from home, working from the office, and even working from somewhere else is the way to go. Your risks have certainly changed. Number 2, what is your process for continuous monitoring and continuous improvement? Not simply from a process standpoint, but do you have a second set of eyes on this information? And most importantly, do you document this information and then use that same documentation to update through continuous improvement your compliance program? And finally, what sources of information do you use which comes from outside your organization? Do you use FCPA enforcement actions that may be relevant to your company via industry, discipline, or even geo-region? Do you keep abreast of international anti-corruption legislation in countries where you do business? Do you have local people reporting to you on the facts on the ground of what's going on? All of this should be incorporated into your model for continuous monitoring and continuous improvement going forward. I hope you will join us tomorrow for day 3 of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program, where we take up leadership's conduct at the top. I know you will find it most useful. If you'd like information on any of the topics from this podcast series, please check out the Compliance Handbook 2nd edition, available at lexisnexis.com/Fox. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program. I hope you will join me for the entire month of January, where I take a look at some of the significant changes in compliance and FCPA enforcement. 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.